Giles Brown.
That's right, listening to me, Giles Brown, on TRE Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain. In 1976, a 21-year-old Sebastian Abineri was cast in Richard Attenborough's epic war film A Bridge Too Far. He joined Attenborough's private army, otherwise known as the APA, a group of 50 young British actors who were brought together to train under the eagle eye of a former director of the SAS to represent the heroic band of paratroopers who held the bridge at Arnhem against insurmountable odds in 1944. The APA worked for 6 months alongside major stars such as Anthony Hopkins, Sean Connery, Michael Caine and Sir Laurence Olivier. It was one of the hottest summers on record, 76s, I'm sure you all remember. So hot that the APA bravely drank the local bars dry. The boys from the bridge recounts their extraordinary story. Sebastian has been an actor for over 40 years. Delighted to be joining me live on the line, Sebastian Abineri. Sebastian, good morning to you.
Good morning, Giles. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I must say, when the production office gives me what I'm going to be talking about and who I'm going to be interviewing, this landed on my desk, and I did let out a small whoop of joy because it's one of my favourite films of all time, A Bridge Too Far. It really is one of those. They don't make them like that anymore. Must have been a fantastic experience to be involved. How did you, as a young actor, get picked to become part of this legendary film?
Well, I was actually out of work at the time. I was living up in Suffolk, and I was working on a local farm feeding silage to the cows for their early sort of mid-morning breakfast, as it were. And it's very smelly stuff, silage, and I got a phone call from London whilst I was in the middle of doing this. The farmer came out and said, "There's a phone call for you." So I went into the house and I picked up the telephone. It was my agent who said that Miriam Brickman, who was one of the major casting directors at the time and had made the careers of some of our finest actors, was inviting me to audition for a new repertory company in the West End to be run by the director Lindsay Anderson, that you might remember directed If and Britannia Hospital and This Sporting Life and many other major movies. But he was starting a theatre company in the West End, and it was going to be a repertory company whereby they'd sort of change the production every now and again and put a new show on. It was a new concept, really, because normally they put a play on in the West End and it just runs and runs and runs until it runs out of steam. But on this occasion, they were going to put a basket of productions together and try and run them in sort of repertoire, if you like. So anyway, I went to the interview. They were appalled at my smell because I absolutely stunk of silage, and they nearly threw me out of the audition. And then Lindsay decided to give me a part of a Russian peasant, which I thought was quite good casting. So
because you had the smell, that's why, presumably.
Because of the smell, yes. That's what got me the job. So he smells like one, so he must be one. If it walks like a duck, it must be a duck. So anyway, I joined the company as what they call an assistant stage manager, whereby you make the tea for the actors, build the set, play small parts, and get the props, that sort of thing, which was great fun working with them for 9 months. And Miriam Brickman, who was the casting director, she was casting A Bridge Too Far. And I didn't know this. I'd gone and bought the book because I'm interested in military history. I bought the book at Foyles and was sitting there reading it, looked on the flyleaf, and it said shortly to be made into a major movie. So I went into the theatre that evening and I said to Miriam, this is just about to be made into a major film. I don't suppose you know who's casting it, do you? And she said, I am. I thought, oh, well, can I be considered for it? And she said, let me have a chat with Lindsay and I'll get back to you. She went off and had a chat with Lindsay Anderson, and she came back and said, yes, Lindsay thinks you'd make a wonderful paratrooper. So can I go for the audition, which was basically what we used to call a cattle call, where about 300 actors turned up to the dance centre in Covent Garden, and we all lined up beside, in front of Richard Attenborough, and he sort of decided which ones were going to go to the recall at Twickenham Studios.
Can I just stop you there?
Yep.
Because what's it like doing a cattle call? What was it like doing a cattle call in front of Dickie? Because I can imagine going, hello, lovies, right then, stand to your marks.
Well, it was actually quite inspiring because we all sat down on the floor. There was about 300 of us. I think every single actor in Equity from the ages of 20 to 35 were there. And he told us the story of A Bridge Too Far, about this small band of paratroopers who managed to get to Arnhem Bridge and hold it for about 6 days against 2 divisions of German tanks. And the only reason they had to surrender was because they ran out of ammunition. They were extraordinary men. And if they'd have been successful, then the road would have been open to get into the Ruhr Valley, which would have meant that the war would have been over by Christmas 44. Unfortunately, it didn't work out like that because of various reasons, which obviously, if you've seen the film, are all explained in the movie. But it was actually quite an interesting audition for us, or if we like to call it a cattle call. But it was actually quite an interesting, and we all were desperate to go. We all wanted to be in the film, and so we all queued up, and Dickie Attenborough decided who was going to take to the recall, which was at Twickenham Studios, and I managed to get through that hurdle, and then I was part of the final 50 that actually went out to make the movie. And then we underwent 2 weeks of basic military training under the guise of a chap called Colonel Waddy, who was a director of the Special Air Service after the war. And he basically whipped us into shape. And
now that must have been interesting because it's 1975, I would presume. I'm thinking
96, 76, yeah.
And you're a thespian, you're an actor. You've probably got your hair's probably some sort of level. Were you in peak physical fitness? I mean, how did the Colonel Waddy take to having a bunch of actors? Well,
they weren't putting us through SAS selection training. Basically, they were sort of putting us through basic infantry training. And then getting us to... we learned, how to march, how to fire the weapons, how to carry out skirmishing, how to do fire and movement, how to, the tactics that you use to blow up a pillbox, all that sort of stuff. And they basically worked us from about 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening, sort of, running, marching, and doing basic infantry training, really. And then... they lined us all up and told us how amazing we all were, which was a ploy, really, to get us, to give us the right amount of swagger and self-assurance that a paratrooper would have had in those days, having gone through a much, much harder program of training than we went through. But it gave us a taste of it, and it gave us an idea of what they were like and what they'd had to go through. I mean, we were put in a sort of barracks-type accommodation, 10 to a room on steel bedsteads with very thin mattresses and sleeping bags and all of that. And but it was, it wasn't exactly... I mean, for that 2 weeks, it was a bit like being in the army, but once we started work, it was a different ballgame. But we knew how to do the skirmishing and all that sort of stuff, so every time they needed a unit of men who looked like they knew what they were doing, they'd use us. And I think it helped, give some authenticity to the film.
What was it like then? When did you actually go out? Where did you actually film? Did you film in Arnhem itself?
No, we couldn't film in Arnhem, obviously, because the whole area around Arnhem Bridge was devastated during the war, and it's all modern buildings now. But what Joe Levine, the producer, found was Daventer Bridge, which was a similar bridge to our twin-span bridge that went across the River Isle, which was quite a wide river, looked like the River Rhine. And then at the basis of one end, at the base of the bridge, there was a big car park where they constructed period buildings. They had a crew of carpenters come over from England and photographs from the original period, and they built, replicated basically Arnhem Bridge at Daventer, a village or a town called Daventer. And
that's the rubble that Anthony Hopkins scurries across in the film itself, isn't it?
That's right. That was all filmed there, and it was basically replicated the buildings around Arnhem Bridge.
And what was it like going on set? Because this was a highly anticipated film. It was Richard Attenborough, and it was an epic. And I said before, they don't make them like that anymore, but it must have been a fabulous feeling walking onto such a huge production. I mean, you must have had the collywobbles, or were you smoothness personified as you took to the set?
It was... We realised that, a bit like soldiers, we were very much a set of very small cogs in a very large machine. And it was a bit like running a military campaign, I suppose. I mean, they had a fantastic first assistant director, David Tomlin, who then went on to do all the Indiana Jones films, who organised the whole thing. I mean, they'd been out there for months before the film started, preparing and building the houses around the bridge. And one of the very first things that happened when we arrived, we went to get our uniforms once we got off the airplane. And we were queuing up, waiting to get our uniforms, and there was this massive explosion and a load of Anglo-Saxon profanities and swear words as all these guys scattered all around the place. And what they'd done is they dug up a load of old tanks out of the Dutch polder and were trying to get them started for the film, and this one just blew up. I mean, the fuel system was obviously gone. Went bang, blew up, and then all the special effects guys were scattering around the place, laughing, and they just started work on another tank and got that going. So it was very like a military operation. It was absolutely huge, and the logistics were. I mean, the first assistant director was an amazing guy. I mean, he'd plan, he'd film a massive sequence of tanks coming across the bridge, of us, sort of performing our jobs as infantry, and then, of course, because sometimes whenever they wanted an action sequence, they'd use us to play Germans or Poles or American paratroopers as well. So,
okay.
So we learned to fire all weapons, and then they gave us small parts to play as we went through the film. So we were used as a sort of repertory company on set.
A platoon of repertory soldiers, if you like.
That's right. But absolutely, and we all spent our time, because we didn't want to get featured on camera, because once we were featured on camera, we were sent home.
Of course,
because we were featured. So basically, the game was to stay out on the movie for as long as we possibly could. So every time we were put near a camera, you get a helmet that was a bit too big that covered your face, or you put a bandage right across your eyes or something to make sure that you weren't seen, unless it was a really nice part that had a bit of dialogue and interaction with one of the major actors on there. In that case, obviously one didn't hide, but what the game was to avoid getting featured, which we actually managed to do, because we were filming a sequence, I don't know if you remember, where Hauptmann Grabner, one of the SS commanders, captain, tries to punch his way across Arnhem Bridge with a column of tanks, and then gets beaten back by the paratroopers who are firing Pierts and machine guns from houses and all of that. But we were on a rooftop, just on the left-hand side of the bridge as they came across, and the special effects boys had put these sort of smoke effect things, which basically were burning away on the top of this roof, which of course was made of plastic and wood, because it had just been made for the film, and it went up. It caught fire. The whole roof caught fire. So we beat an orderly retreat, picking up our weapons as we were taught to do, and went down. And then the Dutch were all watching, and they started laughing, and they went, "Oh, the British run away." And we thought, well, we're not having that. So we went back up on the roof, and it was very important that the building didn't catch fire, because there was 5,000 gallons of fuel to sort of supply the tanks in the actual building. So we didn't want that to go out, because there was a lot of spectators watching the film. That could have gone off like a huge bomb. So anyway, we went back on the top of the roof, and there was a water tank on legs there, which we managed to push over, and this water rushed across the roof with a big whoosh, put all the flames out. And Dickie Attenborough turned up in a Tiger tank with his head poking out the turret.
What a fabulous image!
I know, and David Tomlin, the first assistant director, was sitting next to him on the tank, and he said, "Well done, boys, well done, you've put the fire out." He was really relieved, because they had a lot of filming left to do in that building. And he said, "David, take all their names, and all these chaps on the roof can stay out till the end of filming." So we were guaranteed. We were out till the end of the shoot. So because I was one of the ones that went back up on the roof, I was there for the next 6 months.
Superb. Absolutely superb.
Which is fantastic. And also the guys that went back up on the roof were our football team, which was great too, because it meant we could play the unit a few times.
So yeah, exactly. So I mean, there was a lot of downtime, and a lot of Attenborough's private army were, feared for their on-set prowess, but also for their off-set drinking skills and football skills.
Yes, we had a football team. We had about 50 guys to choose from, and we sort of boiled that down to a fairly reasonable squad of about 15 players. And we had one guy who'd been an apprentice with Liverpool, another one had been an apprentice, as they used to be called in those days, with West Ham. Another guy played for Northamptonshire County, and the rest of us had all sort of made our first 11s at school. So we were quite a good team, and we were, quite not a bad team. When we played the film crew, they had about 350 guys to choose from, and they thumped us a couple of times, but we drew with them in the last match, so that was quite gratifying.
Now, Richard Attenborough assembled, I think it's fair to say, one of the most stellar casts ever for this. If you look at who was it, there was Dirk Bogart, there was Sean Connery in what I think is one of his beefiest roles ever, Michael Caine, Laurence Olivier, Robert Redford, and you couldn't get Redford at that time because he was so hot, and Gene Hackman as the head of the Poles. Did you interact, not forgetting, of course, Sir Anthony Hopkins, or Anthony as he was then. He was perhaps, was Hopkins the person that you saw most of, because obviously he was the head of the paratroopers on the bridge kind of thing? Or
yes, he was playing our commanding officer, and he went through training with us. In fact, he went through training with us for a bit and then went off on his own and did training with... but he actually went through the whole training with us, and he looked after us as well. He took his role as CO quite seriously, and he made sure that we had a washing machine in the place where we were staying. It was called the Old Folks Home where we were staying. They'd moved all the old folks out to a new old folks home, put us in the old folks home. And Anthony Hopkins made sure we had a washing machine, and he sorted out a tennis table for us, and got us a piano, which was out of tune and was only played at about 3 in the morning.
Because didn't he have the person that he was playing on set as well? Didn't he have?
Yeah, Colonel Frost came over to watch the film. Yeah, I mean, I had a chat with Colonel Frost actually, and he said to me that he was furious when he got to Arnhem Bridge, and I said why? He said because it was just like Daventry Bridge. Now on Daventry Bridge, on the other side of the river, it's all green land. There are telegraph poles there, but it's all fields on the other side of the bridge. He said we could have dropped 1, 2, 3 para, 1, 5, 6, 11th and 10th para straight onto the bridge. He said we couldn't have landed the gliders there because of the telegraph poles, but we could have dropped the paras right. They could have dropped about 3,000 men straight onto the bridge on the first and second day, and then the Polish brigade as well. And they wouldn't have had that long march from Ginkle Heath, which was an 8-mile march, all the way from Ginkle Heath, fighting their way through Arnhem to get to the bridge. They could have got thousands of men onto the bridge on the first 2 days, in which case they'd have won the battle, in which case the war would have been over by 1944 Christmas. And he said they should have activated the Dutch resistance as well to take the bridge, because there were about 1,000 ex-Dutch army guys in the town with anti-tank weapons that had been hidden from the Germans, and he said if we'd have activated them, they could have grabbed the bridge just before we arrived, and then we could have parachuted onto it, and the Germans wouldn't have had a chance of taking it back.
What was your feeling then when you actually... just another thing on the Colonel Frost. Is it true that he once stopped Anthony Hopkins from running across because he said an officer would walk rather than run across the no man's land?
Yes, it is true. I actually witnessed how steady Colonel Frost was under fire. Well, not under fire, but he must have been, about 64 when the film was being made. And there was a guard dog that got off its leash. It was guarding the weapons truck because they were worried, the Dutch police were worried that the local South Moluccan terrorists might hijack it and nick all the weapons. And this was a dangerous dog. It was an attack dog, trained to guard this arms truck, and somehow it got off its rope and went for Colonel Frost. I was there, I saw it. And Colonel Frost, most men would have gone, sod this, I'm off, and done a runner. You know, but they probably wouldn't have got very far. But he sort of, somehow with his personality, managed to dominate this dog. He just moved, he didn't shout at it or anything, he just seemed to swell in size and move towards it. And this dog sort of went, bloody hell. You could see his brain declutched, this dog, as he thought, this bloke's not frightened of me, and he's moving towards me. And this dog, which is trained to kill, basically, went and hid behind its owner. I mean, that's the sort of personality he had.
There's a lovely story, isn't there, of Anthony Hopkins dashing across no man's land and this voice roaring out, "Stop!" And he said, you know, in real life, he had actually walked across no man's land, taking fire and not being hit.
That's right. I mean, yes. I mean, you know, it's like he led he led a charmed life in that respect. But he was not going to scuttle around, you know, in front of the enemy and his own men. He was going to demonstrate that he wasn't frightened of them. And I mean, privately, what he was thinking, God alone knows. But he obviously had such a grip on himself that he could do that. He had the courage to walk when he was under fire as opposed to running.
What was it like then when you came into the sort of the final days of filming? It must have been a tremendous sense of achievement, but also, you know, bittersweet because you'd been together for a long, you know, as a platoon almost. You'd been together as a group of men. I mean, how was that? And did you expect it to be such a great success? And did you go to the premiere and that sort of thing?
We went to the screening, which was before the premiere. We went and saw the screening, which was great. It was very sad leaving. It was very weird. Because all of a sudden everybody was there, and then they weren't there anymore. They'd all gone. I mean, I went home on my own. I bought myself an old Citroen 2CV and decided to drive back from Devonshire instead of going on the aeroplane. So I went off to Vlissingen and got the car ferry across, and I suppose I got back into England about 3 in the morning, went to sleep in my car, woke up at 6, looked out of the window, and all I could see, and I could see 6 paratroopers who were with their vehicles, had bivouacked for the night in Harwich, and were on their way back to Holland to clear up after the 1st Battalion's headquarters at the end of filming. And I thought, God, I wish I was going back with them. It was really quite a weird feeling because we had bonded so much. Over the 6-month period, we'd all been, you know, sleeping in the same dormitories, in the same, and then we just dispersed, and it was quite a weird feeling, and very sad, but wonderful memories. I mean, it was the, you know, I've been talking about making A Bridge Too Far since 1976, which is over 40 years, and it was my wife who said to me, "Look, write all this down, put it in a book."
Must have been, and it must have been tremendous fun getting the book together and going and hashing through. And did you get in touch with some of the guys then in that case to reminisce?
They've all dispersed. I've been in touch with a couple of them now. The guy who wrote the introduction to the book is David English, who now he formed Bunbury's. You know, the cricket the cricket team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
He's raised 17 million for charity. He's found something like 70 England international cricketers and God knows how many first-class cricketers. But he started that. He told me he was going to do that out in Holland in 1976. He said, Sebo, I used to be known as Sebo, he said, Sebo, I'm going to start a cricket team for kids, and I'm going to train them how to play cricket, and I'm going to feed them into the England team. And I thought, yeah, all right, David, yeah, nice idea, I'm sure you will, yeah. And then he's done it. He got a CBE, he's Commander of the British Empire for what he's done for charity and for cricket and everything. But I got in touch with David, and I sent him, I was at the stage where I hadn't completed the book, I'd just written a few chapters, and I sent him a few chapters, and he said, you've got to finish this is great, he loved it. And so he said, well, what you've got to do is you've got to send it out to a few publishers and see what they think. So I sent it out to some publishers, and the Book Guild came back and said, but we need you to finish the book. We can't sell it unless you finish it. So once you've finished it, can you send me the whole thing? So that gave me the incentive to actually finish the whole thing off, and I sent it off to the Book Guild, and they said, yes, we'll publish it.
Must be a fantastic sense of achievement and, well, some great memories. Do you get the film out every Christmas and just, spot yourself running around the place?
Yeah, whenever it's on, I watch it. Yes, it always brings back wonderful, happy memories. It's which hopefully I've managed to capture in the book.
The book's called The Boys from the Bridge. It's published. It's out now by the Book Guild Publishing. Sebastian, if people want to find out some more information about it, or you do other stuff as well. Obviously, you're still a working actor, and you don't deal with swine anymore, unfortunately. So, how can they get hold of you in terms of finding out what you're up to? Right.
Well, I'm just about to release a Facebook page, which will publicise the whole book. Now, if you Google The Boys from the Bridge, or Google Sebastian Abineri, but if you Google The Boys from the Bridge, that will take you to the publisher's website. And it's Sebastian Abineri, that's Abineri.
It's been a pleasure to speak to you. I'm a big fan of the film. I could talk to you about this probably for the next hour and a half, but I'm going to run out of the show time. Sebastian Abineri, author of The Boys from the Bridge, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Giles. Thanks very much. Nice talking to you.
Now.